Hi, this is Bhatia, and welcome to our first episode of Newsroom with Mike from Linode. Mike, we have been planning to start this show for a very long time, where we are going to talk about some of the biggest stories of the week. We have chosen Friday as the day so that the viewers, the audience, can get a kind of a wrap up or recap of some of the major movements that happened in this week. So I want to just hand over the mic to you virtually. To first of all, tell us a bit about yourself, and second, what is your idea with this show?
So I'm Mike Maney. I run corporate communications at Linode, the largest independent open cloud provider in the world. Over the years, I've also helped a number of venture-backed early-stage startups and large enterprises like IBM and Alcatel-Lucent figure out how to tell their stories to the world.
We shared some stories that happened in this week that we wanted to talk about. But one story that you were interested in talking about, and I can see one of the reasons why, was Slack's partnership, multi-year cloud partnership with AWS, where basically what they're going to do is they're going to work together, and Slack will leverage a lot of AWS's cloud-based technologies. I want your insight, why you found that story to be one of the most significant story of this week.
Yeah, so SiliconANGLE, Mike Wheatley did a really nice piece on this and really dove into it. But I think one of the things that if we're really paying attention to what's happening here, this agreement that Slack and AWS struck is, it's a bigger deal, right? There's bigger stuff happening underneath it. One of the things that you see is companies like right now, AWS, striking a deal with Slack, which puts a wall, right, puts a barrier for Microsoft in there, in a place where they've been really hot, which is Teams, right, where they're trying to get to dominate the enterprise. We're watching Microsoft, embrace open source much more publicly, much more aggressively. Huge kudos to Satya on this. He's done a tremendous job there. But you're watching them do that, which puts a barrier for them, a competitive barrier for Google, right? It makes life tougher for Google, which has strength there. And then you've got Microsoft with its entire developer community, which everybody in the world has tried. Developers. Everybody is never wants to admit it, but the reality is they are probably one of the strongest developer communities in the world, and in technology's overall history, comparable to the onslaught and the army that is open source.
When you look at this announcement by AWS, the partnership they have with Slack, Microsoft, of course, they have Teams, which also means that, of course, it's a direct competitor to Slack. Which creates a unique position for Slack that they cannot. I do not know how it is either morally, ethically, or trade-wise. How would you use the cloud service of your direct competitor? Going to Azure or going to GCP, where Google is also pushing. Their Hangout is there, Duo is there, Meet is there. So they all compete with Slack, whereas Amazon or AWS, they don't have any service like that. So does that also play a role there? The competition, the fear about putting your IP up there on the servers or the cloud of your direct competitor.
I don't know if that's that the security concern is a big challenge for people. I think as for PR and branding, it absolutely is, because I would take advantage of that if somebody was using my technology and they were a major competitor. I'd wonder why their technology wasn't as good or didn't suffice. But again, I go back to that larger challenge and the larger story that's underneath this. What everybody's doing right now at the let's call them the big three or the big 2.5, depending on how long Google Cloud stays in business and how much commitment they really have to that. These big 2.5, these big three are, they're in a battle not only for the enterprise but for developers. Right? Steve O'Grady at RedMonk, famously said, developers are the new kingmakers, right? And and that's really what's happening here. Is there, people, we're seeing a consolidation in that hyperscale cloud space. So we're seeing each of these companies realizing that even though there's a ton of growth happening, what they what's hap- what that growth is happening, more and more, where they are really battling it out because they're differentiators, right? Amazon is not the only game in town anymore, and that's what Google and Microsoft are realizing, but it's also what customers are realizing, right? They now have all alternatives, right? They have choice for the first time in cloud, and they can go to a Linode or a DigitalOcean or a Vulture, at that thin little alternative tier, where it's not, these companies have the core basics and the core technologies that an Amazon or a Google has. Yeah, do they do quantum computing in the cloud? Likely not, but not a whole lot of people do at this point, right? We're still at a point where a good 80% of companies are just struggling to get to the cloud, and they don't need all of those bells and whistles. So you're starting to see the big three trying to shore up their positions in the market. If I am an Amazon or I'm a Google, based on what I've seen in the industry over the years, I'm really scared of Microsoft because nobody has a hold on the enterprise like Microsoft. Again, another thing nobody really wants to admit, right? Right? It's always good. It's always easy to hate on them, but the reality is they do a really damn good job on at the enterprise, and Google and Amazon are starting to recognize that, and that becomes a significant challenge for them, because it's a different kind of selling, right? It's a different kind of customer.
Mike, that is very good analysis that you gave there about this partnership. Because the fact is, yes, you're right. It's not just about this partnership. If you go deep down in the rabbit hole, then you'll see a lot of reasons why the kind of industry is aligning, with one of these three, and that's where we do need a lot of other players who are in a way actually neutral, where you can go with them without worrying about them competing with you tomorrow. But once again, this was the first show, and I look forward to talk to you again next week. And for viewers, if you want to send us some story ideas that you want us to discuss, please feel free and post them in the comments below. And Mike, any closing thoughts that you have?
Nah, thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to next week and seeing what happens in the news.